Farmers are not laying down their arms. On Wednesday, tractors will block the entrance to all provincial cities in Poland. A record may be broken in terms of the number of local and national road blockages. There are 2 days left until the protest and there are 374 applications. This number of 374 is a record number of gatherings since the beginning of the protests. The situation is very critical. If we don't win this now with the abolition of the Green Deal and about some restrictions there, the import of grain, agricultural products from Russia and Ukraine, then after the elections we won't win it anymore. And there is something to fight for, because agriculture is really our food security. On the 15th of March, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced that as a result of continuing talks with European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission had agreed to abandon the obligation to set aside arable land. Farmers, however, are not giving up. The entire Green Deal should go into the trash, they say. This concession is really a slap in the face for farmers, because agriculture is really 1/10 of the Green Deal. The rest deals with energy transition issues. And the effects will be felt by all of us, which is why farmers remind us that today the Green Deal hits a farmer. Tomorrow each of us will pay for the ideas of the EU elite. A drastic increase in food prices, new environmental and climate taxes, and imposts, a directive on energy efficiency of buildings. On the 12th of March, the European Parliament passed an amendment to the EU's directive on energy efficiency of buildings. Beginning in 2030, new buildings are to be with zero emission, and existing ones are to be retrofitted to achieve this state by 2050, meaning that they will not be allowed to use coal or even gas stoves, and will have to be insulated, at the owner's expense, of course. If we saw what the savings will be on this heating, it would turn out that this savings will pay us back in 50 or 80 years. And this is the utopia that the left is trying to push us into. Starting next year, there will be no more subsidies for gas stoves. Now, according to the new regulations, the green ones are heat pumps. Strangely, Germans are opening plants to produce these devices. In Poland, I don't even know whether a mile of buildings are zero emission. That is, practically all of them will be for thermal modernization and for changing the heating method. The fact that the current ruling coalition saves Siemens because it won the tender for windmills, the fact that German companies want to produce heat pumps and sell them to us, unfortunately, these 3 months should already convince us. Why have an airport in Warsaw when we have one in Berlin? In a week's time, the European Union will vote on an EU regulation on the restoration of natural resources, one of the pillars of the Green Deal, which also hits agriculture. We blocked it. Morawiecki was against it in principle, and it turns out that there are reports that Donald Tusk may agree to it. An election campaign is underway in Poland. Therefore, this is a certain test for the Polish government. Prime Minister Donald Tusk has repeatedly invoked his influence in Brussels. The Prime Minister may show how much influence he has over the European Commission's decisions, or it may turn out that this leverage is less than it might have seemed so far, and less than the politicians of the new coalition have announced. The Agricultural Labour Solidarity Union announces another big demonstration in Warsaw. It will take place on the 10th of May. The unions will protest this time specifically against the EU's Green Deal. Łukasz Muda, TV Republica. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg met Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhtitska on Monday as part of his visit to the region. Today, we have a tough and challenging period in Europe. The world order, which was based on rules, is undergoing some fundamental changes. The idea of a united, free and peaceful Europe is in danger. In such tough times, it's vital that the international community shows united and strong support for the legal principles.
Georgia is one of NATO's closest partners. We highly appreciate your substantial contributions to NATO missions and operations, and we fully support Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. South Ossetia and Abkhazia are part of Georgia. NATO continues to call on Russia to reverse the recognition of Georgian territories as independent states. Russia's organization of elections in occupied parts of Georgia and Ukraine is completely illegal. And Russia's presidential election was clearly neither free nor fair. Georgia is facing complex security challenges. Russia persists its pursuit of imperial ambitions, And in Ukraine, the situation on the battlefield remains difficult.
Stoltenberg also said that Ukraine managed to damage Russia's Black Sea fleet with the assistance of NATO. Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered a speech after winning a record post-Soviet landslide in Russia's election on Sunday. Initially, I would like to thank Russian citizens. We are all one team, all the Russian citizens who came to the polling stations and voted. Vladimir Putin won Russia's presidential election with 87.97% of the vote, according to the first official results shown on Sunday after polls closed. Workers at polling stations counted results in an election where Putin cemented his grip on power, although thousands of opponents staged a noon protest at polling. Vladimir Putin was leading in Russia's presidential election, the Central Election Commission said on Sunday after polls closed. Russian voters cheered on Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, as she joined their queue on Sunday to cast their vote at the Russian embassy in Berlin. After casting her ballot in Berlin, Yulia Navalnaya said that she wrote her late husband's name on the ballot paper. You are probably wondering what I wrote on the ballot papers, who I voted for. Of course I wrote Navalny's surname, because it just can't be so that a month before the election, and already during the presidential election campaign, Putin's main opponent, already in prison, was murdered. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to rule forever, and that Russia's presidential election was an illegitimate imitation. There is not a single bit of legitimacy in this simulation of an election, and there cannot be. This actor should be on trial in The Hague. That's what we have to ensure, together with everyone in the world that values life and decency. A man threw 2 petrol bombs into the courtyard of the Russian embassy in the Moldovan capital, Chisinau, where voting in Russia's presidential election was taking place on Sunday, TASS cited the embassy as saying. A group of protesters gathered near the Russian embassy in London on Sunday, decrying the re-election of President Vladimir Putin and paying homage to the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. A small group of protesters gathered in Paris in front of the Eiffel Tower on Sunday to protest against the re-election of President Vladimir Putin. Hundreds of Russian voters queued outside their embassy in Riga on Sunday, waiting to cast ballots in the presidential election. They admit they have little chance of influencing. I came here to say to others as well, no to the super dinosaur Putin. Up to 2,000 people were lining up around for 4 hours to vote in the presidential election at Russia's embassy in London on Sunday, with the line stretching just over 1 kilometre from the gates. Millions for Germany, pennies for Poland. This is the distribution of EU money for munitions production. Out of a pool worth €500 million, Poland will receive just over 2 million. It's hard to get €500 million if you apply for 10. It's hard to get €500 million if you compete in only 1 out of 5 categories. And it's hard to get €500 million if, out of dozens of Polish companies, only 3 compete. The largest support, a total of €120 million, will go to Germany. And just a few weeks ago, during the presentation of his programme, Prime Minister Donald Tusk argued, I want to tell you that no one will really rip me off in the European Union. Today, however, it seems that this was only a figurative statement. Donald, King of Europe Tusk, has portrayed himself and his team as very influential people in the European Union. With the influence we may now measure. Tusk is well positioned for 0.5% of the real money he got from a particular programme. The money is supposed to allow Europe to double its ammunition production to 2 million shells a year by the end of next year. Some are to go to Ukraine, some to European warehouses. It's not about the war and war preparations here, but it's about the interests of those countries that have plunged into some problems at the moment, especially we're talking about the German economy and are looking for various levers to have development impulses. The boost of European Union cash will, after all, affect the financial condition of armaments companies. The money, it is tantamount to taking from the pockets of our taxpayers and other countries. This is simply unfair and is a direct way of supporting German companies. Hence a fear that German companies, supported by European Union money, may try to buy out competition from Poland. It probably dawns on them somewhere in their heads to sell Mesco to Rheinmetall. But since our society, according to the narrative of the Eurocrats and politicians of the new government, is to be defended by a common European army, we don't need our own armaments either, after all. I want to tell you that no one will really rip me off in the European Union.
Pan premier Donald Tusk
Prime Minister Donald Tusk, his political base, boasts that he has brought these Polish-German or Polish-French relations to a new level from some great limbo, even from non-existence. But the question can be asked, what is the benefit? It depends on for whom. For Poland, a small one. For Germany, a huge one.